It's hard to believe that we're already almost halfway through the year. There have been so many handhelds that have come out in that time. It feels like there's something new to fit every niche coming out every week. In the last 2 weeks alone, there have been over 5 or 6 handheld announcements. Earlier in the year, I made a similar list talking about all the handhelds I recommend, and I figured it might be good time to update that list because of all the releases and announcements we've seen so far. Might be a good time to, update the list. So let's just jump right into this. For the first section, we're going to be talking about devices around $50. I feel like that's a good price for somebody who's just looking for some basic emulation. And it's a real big toss-up between the Anbernic RG28XX and the MiU A30. I like the design and overall build quality of the MiU device, but performance was better on the 28XX. But Anbernic really did sacrifice in the overall build quality to gain that performance, and I really don't think it was worth it. The build quality is not great on the 28XX, and that extra power really doesn't do anything for the device. Frankly, it's just kind of a waste, because that same H700 chipset is capable of some fairly decent emulation, all the way up into like the N64 and PSP titles. But because of its lacking of other buttons other than the default, it's just not very useful. So it has enough power for those devices, but you can't play any of those devices due to the lack of buttons. While the MiU has enough buttons to do that, but lacks the power to play those games. But if you're looking for some just basic emulation of your 2D titles and whatnot, this is an amazing deal for these two devices. They're amazing, very pocketable, but my overall choice goes to the 28XX, even though it has the worst build quality between the two. It just has better firmware options and can have the potential to have better performance, and I value performance above all. And some people might be able to play N64 games on the device, but I might not find that the most comfortable, but because you could, and it's an option, it maintains its number one for my ultra budget section. The next handhelds I feel like talking about is a good place for a lot of people to start. The around the $100 price point is a category that is very competitive for a ton of these manufacturers. And my favorite in this sections are the Retroid Pocket 2S, the RG35XX, and XXH. These three devices I feel like have a good representation about the variety you can get in the emulation scene. The Retroid device is a very good value. It has the best performance and build quality out of the bunch at the price point. The two Anbernic devices being a little bit cheaper than the 2S is nice for its main differences between the two models. The Anbernic non-H model, so the standard 35XX, is a DMG style, while the H model is landscape, and it has the full version of the H700 chipset that the previous devices from Anbernic we talked about in the last section use. So it's capable of emulating N64, PSP, PS1 games very well. And overall, they're pretty good value for being around $75. But the very, very top, the Retroid Pocket 2S being about $100, it just offers so much more performance. Being able to play PS2 and GameCube games, but do bear in mind it won't be able to play 100% of GameCube games and very few PS2 games for some reason. So I would say it can play those games, but just with a big old asterisk there. So bear that in mind if you're buying that device for purely those systems. My number one pick for this section is the Retroid Pocket 2S for $99 and $89 when on sale, and I truly believe it's probably the best value at this price point. Yes, you can get the other two Anbernic devices, but I feel like the Retroid offers just a tremendous value for running full-fat Android and having enough power to even warrant that in the first place. The $200 price point is full of some of the most amazing options, like the Retroid Pocket 4 and 4 Pro, the Anbernic RG556, the original Odin Pro. These are all fantastic options with standout features like the 556 has an OLED display. The Retroid Pocket 4 and 4 Pro has amazing design and very pocketable. the Odin has top-tier performance. So it's really hard to go wrong when you're starting to get around this price point. You'll mostly be spending this on either a company that you really like or a particular design, because at this price point, it should be expected that all these devices can play some amount of GameCube and PS2 games, even some light Nintendo Switch if you're lucky. All these devices are a pretty stiff competition with each other, and I made videos about most of these devices before, and some standouts are the 556 over something like the RP4 and 4 Pro. Those devices are really good. I love their design, their overall feel in the hand. It's really good. But the ergonomics in the beautiful OLED display that the 556 offers is tremendous. And thankfully it runs Android and not Ambernix's terrible Linux operating system that they use on some of their handhelds. So that part is actually pretty good. And a lot of these handhelds even come with games or emulators pre-installed. Granted, they're very out of date, but most of the time they run perfectly fine. But that's what makes this category so tough. There isn't any particularly glaring problems with any of these devices, really. They're all manageable or usable in their own way, and some of them have some features that others don't, like the Odin Pro just having the largest display and the best processor on it comes from the fact that it is last year's model of the Odin. So that comes with some higher-end features. And even though this device is approaching almost a year and a half, 2 years old, it still offers tremendous amounts more performance than the other two options. Don't get me wrong, the other two do run really well. But the fact that the Odin Pro, first generation mind you, runs a Snapdragon 845, it's just more powerful in every aspect than the other two. That allows you to run some pretty high-end emulation. Things like Nintendo Switch, 3DS, even Vita emulation is all possible on the Odin Pro. And that high-end DNA trickles down to when it starts, getting cheaper with time and is trying to sell off old stock, makes it a really good value. This used to be like a $350 device that's now $200. And that's why for me, even though I love the OLED display in the 556, making it a close runner-up, my number one pick for the $200 price point is picking up some old stock Odin Pros versus buying something from Retroid or Anbernic. You can still go on Ein's website and buy this. I'll have it linked down below if you're interested. The final category is around $300. This being the most expensive I would go for if I'm buying a dedicated handheld for emulation. And with that, there aren't a whole lot of options that really stand out at this price point. For the default option for me in the past, and still is really, is the Odin 2 base model. It's probably the best value in gaming right now. But with Ein's recent announcement of the Odin 2 Mini, and it looks amazing, though not out yet, I can already see this handheld being the best we see this year, sharing the same SoC as the Odin 2, but with a new Vita-inspired design, with a mini LED display, the same kind of displays you would see on something like an iPad Pro, at least until the most recent one. That one uses OLED. Tangent aside, that would be my pick, but considering that's not out yet, I'll wait to levy my judgment on that when that comes out. And some of the competitors in this price point, stuff like the Razer Edge or the Logitech G Cloud, are just kind of bad or too expensive. Like the Razer Edge was like $400 for kind of shitty performance, and the G Cloud was not designed specifically for emulation, with only a Snapdragon 765G, which not in of itself being a terrible chipset, it's just not particularly powerful and more designed for the game streaming that was initially designed for. Even some offerings from Aya are a little expensive, like the Aya Neo Pocket Air and Pocket Air 2 or something like that. I keep forgetting what all their devices are called, because generally speaking, I feel like they're a little too expensive to warrant that. Devices being around $400 versus the Odin 2 base model, which is the one I recommend the most, being around $300. So my overall pick for the $300 price category is going to be the Odin 2 base model, at least until I can get my hands on the Odin 2 Mini. And if you're curious what my overall pick, what I would choose between all of these devices I've talked about in this video, I personally would pick up a last gen Odin Pro, just because that is a great value. $200, you're getting a high-end chipset capable of Nintendo Switch, 3DS, the pinnacle of mobile emulation. For $200, that's great. But I would love to hear what you guys think. What device are you interested in? Did this list help you pick any device? I would love to hear what you guys think down below. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. All the other social media garbage down below. And last but not least, have a wonderful day.